On today's episode of Fantasy OT, we're going to be talking about 3 rookie receivers that should have an immediate impact. Kicking off our list, John Metchie. I know John Metchie isn't technically a rookie receiver, but since he missed his first season due to leukemia, I consider him one. I think Metchie would have absolutely been drafted in the first round had it not been for a torn ACL in the 2021 SEC Championship game against Georgia. From a fantasy perspective, he's walking into a great situation. We're talking about a guy that's coming to a team with a rookie quarterback that's going to be looking for a playmaker that he can rely on. Metchie's going to be doing a lot of his work out of the slot. You got Nico Collins at the X and Robert Woods at the other side. I think Metchie's going to be relied on heavily with Dalton Schultz for those short and intermediary passes, bolstering his value in PPR. I may be biased, but it seems like these Alabama receivers just hit the ground running once they get drafted. And I feel like Metchie's going to be no different. What I think is really going to help Metchie, though, is the fact that Brandon Cooks is now in Dallas, and he leaves 8 targets up for grabs. I'm sure a lot of that will go Nico Collins' way, but Metchie could very easily separate himself from the group if he starts to develop chemistry with CJ Stroud. As of now, Metchie really isn't being drafted, so you could probably just pick him up after the draft, or if you want to take a dart throw, you totally could. You could do a lot worse, given that the Texans have a really favorable schedule and the fact that they're going to be chasing points a ton. Up at number 2, Quentin Johnston. Johnston was drafted basically to be Mike Williams and Keenan Allen insurance, and I think he probably will be that this year to some degree. But even outside of that, the Chargers have been looking for a third dynamic playmaker for a while. And I think Johnston could absolutely fill that role. At 6'4", 215, he's a big-bodied receiver that's been making splash plays at training camp already. We're hearing about his contested catches, his catch radius, and he has a basketball background. I think that's really going to help him do well right away, especially on those 50-50 balls. Justin Herbert had the second most pass attempts in the league last year, and he was in the top 12 in terms of deep ball accuracy. So I think he's still going to be throwing it downfield, and he's definitely going to be throwing it a bunch. And I think Johnston is going to be a beneficiary regardless of what role he has. From what it sounds like, he's going to be doing a lot of his work at the X spot and not at the slot, so he's going to find his way onto the field one way or another. Johnston averaged a ridiculous 19 yards per catch during his time at TCU, and I would imagine that the Chargers want to utilize that skill sooner rather than later. Herbert was able to make it work last year with guys like Josh Palmer, Donald Parham, and Gerald Everett, and I think if he has a legitimate third receiving threat, they could really take a big leap this year. Johnston's currently being drafted on the middle to end of the 10th round, and I think that's a great investment for a player that's in an offense that's going to be spreading the ball a ton and giving all pass catchers a decent amount of opportunities. Topping our list at number 1, at 5'9", 185, you probably don't think a guy like Zay Flowers would strike the fear in hearts of DBs, but you would be wrong. There was another Ravens receiver, if you remember, that was also 5'9", about 180 pounds, and he was also from Florida, and he was also the number 1 receiver on the Ravens, Marquise Brown. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of similarities between these two. The only difference is Zay Flowers is a little bit more electric, and he's faster coming out of his routes. So I can see his game translating to the NFL a lot quicker. He's probably going to be working out of the slot a bunch. They still have Rashad Bateman, who's been injury prone. OBJ did get the big contract, but he's at the tail end of his career. And he's been toying with retirement after this year from what he's been saying. So I would imagine they're going to want to get Flowers up to speed because he's the future. Him and Andrews are probably going to form a tandem for years to come. I can totally see Flowers separating himself from the bunch because he is the most explosive receiver out of the 3 and becoming the number 1 sooner rather than later. Of course, there may be some growing pains. Flowers struggled with drops at times in college, and that may happen at this level, but he'll more than make up for that with his playmaking ability. What I also really like about Flowers is the fact that he really has no injury history. Overall, I think Flowers is a great pick, especially around that 10-11 turn, but I think his value will be a little bit higher in PPR leagues given that he'll be catching the ball a bunch out of the slot. That wraps it up for me in Fantasy OT. Those are 3 rookie receivers I think are going to have an immediate impact. Please subscribe and leave your thoughts on which rookies you think are going to have an immediate impact in the comments below.